Okay, I think I'm currently live, or I'm hoping so. My connection's currently pretty bad, is the only catch. But hi everybody, or those who are tuning in. My name is Jas Brooks, and I'm one of the residents at the laboratory residency for spring 2021. And for our first stream, all the artists are basically kind of showing like their studio, their workspace, and basically like the area that they usually work in. And I can see the chat in general, so feel free to pop in questions or things like that when I start walking around in a bit. I will not be able to answer questions anymore just because I'll be on my phone. So yeah, basically for my residency project, I'll be looking at can we do smell jockeying by mailing scratch and sniff cards to people, like these ones, and then essentially doing live queuing through Zoom or Twitch for telling people what odors to smell and when. And there's a lot of like details that I have to figure out, some paper engineering that I'll be doing because I'll be using children's scratch and sniff cards or scratch and sniff stickers, as well as trying to DJ for the first time of my life, which should be an interesting experience. For this first stream, I'm going to be showing the studio or the room that I'm in currently. There's some work being done where I'm usually at, but I can show where I am currently, which is kind of a mess from research projects that I'm trying to wrap up. So let's go ahead and get into that. I'll just switch. So this is my phone. It's a bit delayed from everything else. You can kind of see like computer setup over here. Need to minimize this stuff. Great. So let me get up and like move back. But basically, I have a desktop computer with a really cheap scanner from Shop Goodwill because that stuff is incredibly necessary when you do this. When you do things like reproductions of old cards, 2 screens usually very helpful for streaming, especially. That's what I've been finding since last year. Over here, this is a Braille slate. This is what we use to, for example, produce Braille on cards manually. So you can kind of see this is saying cyber stuff. For accessibility. And then over here, kind of stacked together right now, I usually swap my devices these days, is a printer with a heat impeller. And this is really useful because I need that kind of stuff to seal scratch and sniff cards into individual poly bags to avoid like the surface being scratched during shipment or things like that. Let me just quickly check. Great. So the delay might be pretty intense with the stream, but that's fine. So currently I'm in like New Mexico. Over here is the other second part that's really important for what I usually do. And here you have 2 different paperweights. This is 110 pounds. This is pretty pliable. And then this is 140, I think. Thicker, usually what I use like my prototype cards for. This is a craft cutter, the Cry-Cut in particular. Basically cuts all the designs that I produce for either stickers or for the card itself for afterwards. So you can see, for example, this card, for example, you can see the translucent sticker, like scratch sticker sheets, were then cut to match the original size of these cards. And I can actually show this, which is kind of like a side-by-side. And I'm also colorblind, so you can see here kind of like the original one had a similar area. So that's one of the tools that I use the most, is like a craft cutter to automatically cut all the shapes. It'd be pretty tedious doing it on my own. And that's hooked up to a computer, so you can do things like use Illustrator to basically tell it what to cut, produce your own designs, things like that. I have a Glade Wisp, which is from the 2000s that I got from eBay for fun. Let's see. Over here are the Sophie cards that I produced recently. These are the ones without the odors. You gotta see. This is a blind emboss. So blind embossing means that the emboss doesn't have any graphic details, so you can usually just see it by certain angles of light or by touching. Very soft. Then over here, I have a second table on my laptop that is like dying from 2013. Here, a couple of different iterations of a scratch and sniff card. So, with children's scratch and sniff stickers, kind of prototype odors. This is one of those cutting things. I don't know what the word is off the top of my head right now. Very, very useful, as well as a kitchen scale to measure anything that I'm shipping out. You can see some organized orders from children's scratch and sniff cards. This is a vanilla scent in particular. This was for a product. For burning and shipping CDs, of which I did that for here for this project. My place is kind of a mess. For the Sophie project, so you can kind of see vellum paper with burnt seal, and then a packaged card, which includes one of these guitar picks, the odors, and then a scent block that's also cut using the card cut. Let's see. Here's some cards. Was the one who designed these cards. This is from the everything. This is an odd object right now. Sterilizer for baby bottles, which I'm using for sterilizing some of my devices since I have to work remotely instead of being in the lab. Cards, stuff, research prints. I assembled my neurobiology textbook, and then over here, a mess of boxes as I'm moving things around. But this part's pretty important. This is basically my storage for a lot of the scratch and sniff stuff that I have. So this is a sample storage, basically anything that where I've used an odor previously and have scraps of in a bag for, I keep here for future reference. So I have like hot dog, buried bone, soap, there's a bunch of them over time, chocolate, there's a label maker, and then a braille label maker. This is a pretty interesting device. It actually, when you pull this down, I can maybe show. So now you have this, and then if you rotate this to an actual thing, you then hold it down really hard, let go. So quick bumps, and you can see the braille is actually coming out. Pretty useful for shipping cards with braille. Then underneath here is a bigger organizer with stock fragrances that I have currently. This is from like the higher end company. And then if you go down, children's scratch and sniff stickers, current project that I'm working on as a thank you gift for Steve Moretsky. We're going to be adding odor to Leather Goddesses of Phobos. Vellum paper, useful for protecting odors, some stock paper as well, some flashcards with odors on them. This is from Leisure Suit Larry, so you have sea breeze, coconut, musk, and so on. The projects. Usually when I'm shipping these cards, I try to put them in noticeable envelopes, not for like just aesthetic purposes, but so that people can quickly identify the scratch and sniff card from their mail. More of them. Oh wait, this is the same one. More children's scratch and sniff stickers. So these are kind of like the ones I'd be using. There's a particular brand that I'll be using for anyone that's curious. Let's see, maybe it's over here. Called the Stink Factory, which has a bunch of odd odors. So here's bread, for example, which you can't find from a lot of like children's places except this one. And then cola, marshmallow, these are pretty interesting. Baby powder, a very odd one, does go in that one for free. And then a hamburger. So this kind of gives you an idea of the range. And in fact, with the residency money, I'm getting a sample of all of their odors so that I can kind of keep it as a library for future projects. And then the last drawer, which is me kind of experimenting at one point with the idea of like pop-up structure. So this is like a sliding door. You pull away the design, pull away the design, and then it would reveal the odors. So I was trying to prototype that, and you can see like me doing a couple iterations and thinking about the text. This is for Behind the Great Wall, which is a movie from 1960. My collaborator and friend Tammy Burnstock has like the trailer for it, so we're thinking about potentially odorizing it. Over here, this is a really weird one. This is a find from Shop Goodwill. This is a Braille embosser. So you can connect it to my computer, and then I can Braille things, and there's a couple like fun designs. So over here, Braille flower and bee. Braille person with an infill. Uh-oh. Oops. And then, oops, okay. And then a anthropomorphic dog with a flower smelling in big sparkles. That's pretty fun. I've just been experimenting with the idea of like Braille embossed objects with odors. This is a couple different like odors and stock fragrances that I have right now for other products and research things. Kind of a mess here. Some Jas paper, 3D printer, and then another 3D printer. These I'm almost exclusively use for my research projects, just because they take and they need like that printing time. And you can see actually for one of my research projects, a kit where I had a sample of like 37 different odors, scratch and sniff odors that were mailed to people. And fire hydrant useful. And I'll be setting that back up. You could see like boxes underneath my workbenches essentially that I'm trying to hide. I need to pass the magic cleaner. And then trash, yeah, you can see like electronic stuff over here as well. So yeah, that's mostly my office. And I see some people actually responding to stuff. So I'll switch to this screen again. Now you get to see like my horrifying desk one more time. Let's see. So there. And now it's probably going to go much faster. So what are people saying? Yeah, so I see that Alan's asking about, with the paper engineering, what sort of elements of sculptural form do you hope to use with your set? So that's a great question. As you can kind of see in this window, I started doing some initial designs. Now, before even thinking about kind of like the aesthetic side of the card, I've been thinking about some of the roadblocks. So since I is kind of focused on this idea of smell identification, I don't want the children's scratch and sniff cards, which have images. I'll go grab one right now from that company. Yeah, so a lot of like the stain factor in children's cards, they tend to have images already on them. So you can see like hamburger has a literal hamburger on it. And if I go with that, I kind of lose the ability to lead people into realizing what the odor is through the sound or through triggering the visuals later. And so what I've been kind of working on is this funky device, which I call like a rotary scratcher. It's inspired by a rotary phone. Kind of a weird object to take inspiration from. But the basic idea is that instead of having a separate scratcher or using your fingernail to release the odor, you would embed the scratcher into the card itself. And instead of having the microencapsulated children's scratch and sniff sticker be visible, you actually flip it. And so you get this kind of structure where you have the Velcro, and then you would have this rotary element with your material on the underside. And so I already mocked this up last week as part of my progress. Let's see, I'm going to try and go into a manual work mode. Great. So you can see kind of here a mock-up. You've got the spacers, which creates like a hole and space for the air to pass by when you're breathing it in. And there'd be a metal fastener in the middle. And then you put this down, which on the underside has the children's scratch and sniff sticker, right, cut as well. And so when you rotate it, the Velcro actually scratches it, releases odor into this chamber, and when you bring your nose up to it, you'd be able to then smell it. And I could smell it, and it's like, it smells like blueberry to me. Yeah, so this is like I'm trying like different iterations of basically how to combine pop-up / paper engineering ideas with ways to hide the scratch and sniff sticker from people so that I can actually use these pretty cheap stickers in other contexts or decontextualize the odor in some sense. Yeah, and then let's see, I'm getting some other messages. I'll just leave this here for the moment, and you can see I'll have like a look down. So Janelle, oh, thank you. Janelle saying that is amazing. And then EWU, music technology entrepreneurship. Very excited to watch your project evolve. Jas, super interesting. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Janelle, I might have missed this, but is it possible to create your own scents, or is that technology super expensive? That's a really good point. So the technology, I don't. So the technology industrially tends to be expensive, and a number of companies are doing stuff like that. They're getting smaller. So it used to be that 3M was the company to source all those things. That's where I believe Steve Moretsky and other goddesses of Phobos got their cards made, or sourced the odors at the very least. And oftentimes what you can do is things like you can get like a jar of the microencapsulate and treat it like ink, and then you can do screen printing. But it becomes more and more expensive the more odors you have. Now, to produce your own odor for this is possible, and there's design guidelines for companies such as Printascent. They're usually specific to the company because each company might have a very different way of producing the microencapsulated odors. And the issue here is that I don't think there's been attempts at miniaturizing this software or making it DIY. That's been something that I've been kind of interested in exploring and been chatting with people about, is can we actually make a device like that at home so that people that are either amateur perfumers or olfactory artists or what have you can try and produce their own odors and just test at home really quickly how it's going to read when it's microencapsulated. And from looking at literature, I think it's definitely possible. It's a bit messy, the ones that I've been looking at, which is the type is called like coversion. So the basic idea is that you have a spinner that goes into the liquid, and the liquid will have like water plus a reagent, something that's going to react and produce a wall. And you spin it super quickly, and then you drop in your odorant that has the other chemical agent to react with the one that's in the water. And when the two of them react, they actually create like a small plastic wall that encapsulates the odor, because you want fragrances or chemical compounds that dissolve more in alcohol versus water. You don't want it to go into the water, which is just supposed to be the material. It's like a suspension. And so when you do that really fast with kind of like mixing it super quickly, it creates tiny droplets, and that's how you actually create these like micro capsules of odor. And then you just dry it out, you remove the liquid, the water, you're left with the capsules, and you can combine it with an adhesive and just print it on things like ink, which is really cool. And I would be super excited if I could figure out how to do that. So if you are an engineer as well or something like that, I'm not the world's best engineer, and have suggestions, I would appreciate that a lot. But that's the basic idea, and I'm not too worried about sharing it, because like if people want to work on this together or have thoughts or stuff like that, or want to scoop me, I'm not going to be mad. I would be happy if like someone actually makes that anyways. So yeah, I don't know if how long I've been rambling. For 23 minutes, not actually that long. Yeah. So that's, sorry for the super long answer. Hopefully it's streaming okay and it answers that question. But I'm happy to answer anything else on the different renders. I ended up doing this already because I was super excited last week, which is not very helpful. Or if anyone has questions about materials that I use, of which one of them is actually hiding back here. This is something that I got for the Residency itself for 40 bucks. It's a MIDI controller. DJs usually use this kind of equipment, and the basic idea for it is you have velocity pads that can sense if you're pressing it, how quickly you're pressing it, and how hard, if I remember right. And I chose a 16 one because I just like them more than anything else. I think more than this. So I hypothetically could have, let's see, 16 by 4, 64 different odors if I needed to. I probably won't be able to do that because I have to limit myself to something that's going to be cheap to mail. So the post has its own regulations on this kind of stuff. And I settled on a size that would fit in a pretty regular envelope. This is a 6-inch by 9-inch piece of paper for which I'll then design the actual card on. And it's just kind of like a bounding box for the design. The other issue is that when you're dealing with mailing things, usually you want them to be flat. So one of my concerns with this design, for example, the rotary one, is of course it's not flat. It actually is 4 times the thickness of regular paper. And when you get to a certain thickness, you have to pay more. It's called you have to basically switch it from a 55-cent or a 50-cent forever stamp to a 70-cent forever stamp. So it's non-machinable, and it kind of like pays for the extra weight, size, or what have you. And if that happens, I have to just take into consideration that it's going to shift my budget around, which I'm happy to share with people if people want to see that. But it wouldn't be too drastic. Oh yeah, but back to this. One of the things that I'm interested in doing with this device is kind of doing the cue work in a way that's live, kind of like how DJs do it. And so this seems like a pretty good way to do it. Maybe make it the cues respond visually to how I'm pressing buttons, as well as this is an XY thing. I don't know what it's called exactly, but basically you can put your finger on it and control 2 variables in the X, in the Y direction, or in the X direction. And one of the initial thoughts that I had for this was programming it with something called GL Mixer, so that you can control the size of the cue in one direction and potentially the opacity in the other one. And so that would let me kind of play around with, I guess, maybe giving additional cues, or at least making it more aesthetically integrated than just like a number flashing, like when John Waters did Polyester, if anyone's seen that or experienced that movie. So yeah, that's mostly it right now. I see that the stream is pretty far behind, so sorry about everybody. There's probably like 5 to 10 minutes delay on things. Yeah, good here. Pretty fun. With the glue that I'm currently using, which is like Elmer's white glue, I am getting warping of the card, which is kind of frustrating. So I think that what I have to do for that is use like stick glue and then have something to hold it flat together. Not really sure what, but something I'll have to think about in a bit. And then, let's see, other random things that might be of interest to people. I actually do have something that's kind of interesting. I'll go grab it, because it's relevant in this case. Is it over here? I think it's in my library area, so I'm gonna go grab that. Got it. Oh, this is a really weird one. I don't know how many people are here. Okay. Yeah, there. All right, so I have in my hands a pretty odd object. So this is a big folder. I'll actually put my camera like this for now. I have two cameras now. Fascinating. And I'm going to flip this one. Transform. Oh, I can't flip it. Interesting. No, you can't flip stuff while you're streaming. That's fine. So this is a book that serves kind of like an archive of scratch and sniff things that I've collected in the last year. So here, this is a TV guide from 2007, which had a My Name is Earl scratch and sniff. There's a copy of my Sophie scratch and sniff card. Let me angle this a bit further down so it's a bit easier. Sophie scratch and sniff. I've never actually done it like this. Oh, thank you. Polyester card. There's a couple different variations of this card that's existed over time. So what you'll notice is actually that polyester also use stickers. It's a much cheaper way of doing it than doing screen printing of 10 different odors. And funny enough, the new polyester cards that are for the Criterion Collection Edition are screen printed, which is just like impressive in terms of production, quality, and pricing. Right? Like kudos to the producers. Another polyester card also with the numbers, and then in this case they're very spaced out, potentially to avoid cross-contamination between odors when you're smelling things. And then instructions like don't scratch things before the number appears. This is the Rugrats, if anyone remembers that one. They released promotional scratch and sniff cards when it came out at Burger King and at Blockbuster from Blockbuster one. 6 odors: strawberry, peanut butter, flower, the feet of a child, very strange, root beer, and then fish. It's kind of interesting that they have visual markers as well. So they're not trying to hide something from you, but they are hiding the context that they appear in. Another one, I just got these because I was like, hey, they're cheap, no one really wants them, so I'll take them. This is the original card from Leather Goddesses of Phobos. It is screen printed also. That's an expensive process, as I've been saying. And what's kind of interesting about this is that in the panel discussion that I had with Stephen Moretsky and Michael Dornbrook was there also, both from Infocom, they actually shared that when they tried to reduce the costs of the card because of the screen printing process, the company 3M ended up just giving it for free. They were just like, well, it's such a small quantity that you're doing, so we can just give it to you as a sample. So yeah, interesting historical stuff. This is the reproduction card that I produced for the Twitch and Sniff Along series. In this case, it was stickers instead. Leisure Suit Larry reproduction card. This is from the 80s, if I remember right. And it's a pair of 3D glasses for a film that was produced in the 1950s called Gorilla at Large. And in this, basically in the 80s, there was a revival of broadcasting 3D movies as like special events that people would go to 7-Eleven and get these kinds of glasses for. And this one had a banana sack on the forehead. Kind of an odd one. So there's two of those. This movie is called, I think it's called like Steam Room Stories, if I remember right. It was originally like a YouTube series, and then they produced a movie, and the director wanted to pay homage to John Waters, and so produced these cards. They're still on the website online if you're interested in getting them. The director actually is the one who mails them out, which is very nice. He sent me a very nice email for getting some. This is from a promotional event on TV for The Office. I actually never watched this show. It's for Smell-O-Vision. And instead of modifying the actual show, in this case they had the cues come up by telling people what the line is that they should scratch and smell it, including images that kind of represent what's being smelled. So that's the promotional one. Living Single, that's a iconic 90s TV show. Basically the original Friends, I would say, if I remember right. I would say it's better than Friends. I don't really like Friends, and I'm not super into sitcoms, but that's fine. It came with 4 odors for their Mother's Day special. And then as part of a promotion called Foxorama, which had these packets of like a 3D glasses and other odors, of which the other thing that was made specifically for odor at that time was the 4th version of Revenge of the Nerds. So Revenge of the Nerds 4 for TV had odor. Then for people that are younger, this is an iconic one, Aromascope, which was done for Spy Kids 4D. So you can kind of see it here. This was a mess. People couldn't understand anything that was going on with the smells. And that's because in part, the area that's screen printed with odors are almost touching. So there's no space between odors, and you would just kind of smell things all together. This was like 2011, I want to say. Honey Boo Boo TV special with odors, 6 of them, if I remember right. I think there's more on the back. This is a movie from last year, direct to VHS. It's like a VHS slasher indie film that was also released with 6 odors called Spirit Animal, produced with Smell-O-Vision. Revenge of the Nerds, and then I think I'm getting to the end, but basically this one is Leslie Nielsen Naked Gun 2.5, I want to say, or 1.5. The promotional materials for like VHS rental places included like a scratch and sniff centerfold where you can kind of follow along what the character is doing and smelling in the film. Not meant to be watched with the film, but kind of an interesting thing. This was a promotional one for Harmony Korine's The Beach Bum, which had 4 odors. And here they're kind of like using snapshots from the actual film to cue you for the odors. I thought that Harmony Korine was the same person as, what's her name? The person who made Juno until like a month ago. So my film knowledge is not the best. And then, interesting. 2 of these. This is the My Name is Earl one that's coming up. Yep. Sponsored by Oreo. So the director of this TV series was interested in doing like an homage to John Waters also. Talked to John Waters about this, who said, okay. I don't really know why people ask that. I know he's the inventor, but whatever. And there's 6 odors. There's a backside to this. They were forced to use Oreos as one of the odors, if I remember right. Very odd. Yeah, you can even see like Oreo images. Laugh and Sniff sticker was the name. And then these further down ones are just prototypes of the card that I'm designing right now. And this is from Steam Room Stories. The cards are pretty cheap once you actually produce a bunch of them. So yeah, that's my collection of scratch and sniff things. And the last one I recently got, which is over here. This one's pretty cool. This is from Scent of Mystery. So Scent of Mystery is the first movie and the only movie that was produced with smell-o-vision. And what's neat about this is they broadcasted it on TV in the 1980s too. And they made this movie had like 30 something odors originally. And they successfully made a scratch and sniff, like accordion fold out piece with 30 odors. And you flip it over. And people were actually asked to basically, they probably had like a card of all the stickers. And as they watched the movie, they would insert the sticker. So you can actually see things like registration circles for where people are supposed to put it to complete the image. The odors are still like intact. That's clover, mint, like peppermint, onion. They smell fantastic still. I snagged 2 copies somehow off of eBay. And is there anything else? I think I have a couple different documents in the back. That's in that vein. Kind of like historical objects. Yeah, part of the reason why I'm excited about engineering these things like the sentinel emitter and stuff is just I'm wondering if John Waters is really right in saying that this could only be a gimmick. Oh, thank you, Janelle. I also have scans of all of them, so I can make that public at some point if anyone wants it. I'm trying to think, what else? Yeah, I think that's mostly it. Oh, I guess this is kind of related. One of my friends, slash a fellow researcher, was talking to me about incense paper. This is not as like beautiful as the one that I saw. There's a company called HAKO, HA space KO, that's making gorgeous, gorgeous incense paper that's embossed to look like leaves. But this one's a pretty traditional one, in France at least. This is called Papier d'Arménie. And I got a copy because I just fantastic. Just like this. It's got like a vanilla backing, some oud or something like that. And it doesn't seem that hard to actually produce these. The nice thing about these and scratch and sniff stickers is it's super easy to mail that. If you're mailing anything like perfume, you end up getting international issues just because anything that's flammable, like the alcohol in perfume, can flag your thing and you can't mail it anywhere unless it's by like ground shipping. So Janelle's saying, I remember that Revenge of the Nerds Smell-O-Vision episode. Yeah, so I rewatched it recently, along with the Living Single one, and the Living Single one was fascinating because you could actually tell when the odors were being used. It was incorporated into the dialogue directly, and there were like uncomfortable pauses, probably for like to let people smell something and think about it. The Revenge of the Nerds one, I watched it and I had no idea where the odors were supposed to be. None. The version of it that's on YouTube, Revenge of the Nerds 4, it doesn't have the labels anymore, and a lot of these movies that are re-released that have like smell cues promotionally often didn't keep their cues. So it's kind of an odd and hard thing to work with. The one for like Scent of Mystery, which is lost, only the recut Holiday in Spain is left, or Tale of Old Whiff, you could actually figure out when the odors were supposed to appear, not scratch and sniff, but when the odors with that system was supposed to appear, because it was embedded into the audio track at a certain frequency. Very, very cool trick. And then Alan's asking, how long do scratch and sniff stay viable? What implications does that have for arts preservation? Amen. This has been like a big issue that I've been thinking about with this kind of stuff, especially when doing like the game series, because when you're reproducing these cards, there's a bunch of issues and factors that come up. So the viability, it depends on the process. With things like polyester cards or the Scent of Mystery card that I showed you, those ones still smell 30 years after the question, and same thing with the Leisure Suit Larry cards if it's not been scratched. The issue is that the amount of odor deteriorates as you scratch it. So it's kind of like if someone's watching it or smelling it obsessively, then that'll reduce the ability for it to last for 30 years. Now, the other part of this is because 3M stopped producing these things to like source odors from different companies which might not have the same formulation, and that tends to be the issue. So if you watch the Steve Aretsky panel, Steve actually smells the banana odor and says like, wait, like it smells more candy than it was originally. So there's that additional factor where there might be a nominal match where I go for an odor that says like banana and I get that. That's the only thing that I have access to. And it might match the name of the odor that was used for the game, but the actual execution and interpretation of that odor can be completely different. And I think when I was watching like an interview with John Waters about the Criterion Collection re-release, I think he was kind of mentioning that 3M threw out the formulas for the original odors because that would have been phenomenal for preservation, right? Essentially, you would want to preserve one, the manufacturing process or the microencapsulation, and then two, you would want to preserve something like what's it called? The manufacturing process, and then two, the actual formulations for the odors, because then you would be able to reproduce the card as much as you want. A lot of these fragrances, like in the perfume industry, tend to just be kind of trade secrets, so they don't release any of this stuff. And the only solution I can think of currently is collaborating with someone like that works in chemical analysis or analytical chemistry, I mean, and essentially do what's called headspace sampling. So you would use like a small glass dome on the area that you want to collect the odor or the air from. So you would scratch an area, put the dome on, collect the odor into like a porous material, and then use that to chemically analyze what the formulation would be, and hopefully be able to map whatever that is to a new formulation. And there might be some deterioration, but at least it would preserve whatever is the current state of these odors to be reused for other contexts, or to reproduce the cards more accurately. So yeah, that's been definitely on my mind. How do you actually preserve these things? Yeah, hopefully that answered that question. And I'll just quickly say like, there's just gonna be like a moment of silence in the stream because I'm just kind of sitting here waiting for things to catch up. Oh, I guess I can just kind of mention this stuff in the meantime. This is my bag of scratchers, is what I kind of call it at this point. It's basically guitar picks that are being repurposed as a means to scratch the surface of your card. And you partially want to do that because when you scratch with your finger, it might actually linger on your hand, and you might be smelling that throughout all the odors. And so it's a heart shape, it's red, and the design is inspired by the cover of by the Goddesses of Phobos. So it's like a sniff symbol. Focus. It's pretty cheap. A bag of 500 is like $100. It's not like, if you're getting funding for this kind of stuff, it's not too bad. And then I've been just using this for all the projects that I do. But the current rotary design is really, I guess, pushing this in a direction that I didn't think of originally, with this idea of like embedding the scratching mechanism directly into the medium. So I'll use my last 5 minutes if I don't have any other questions, and still happy to answer things, to kind of re-look over my budget, which might be of interest for people that are watching or that are curious about how do you actually budget this stuff. So my budget kind of has two different structures. I have a small stipend for myself within it, and then contingency costs. This is pretty standard. You always want to have some backup resource or flexibility in your budget for things like taxes or what have you. There's three different categories. There's fees, prototyping. So this is the phase where I just try different odors out, or I use materials to prototype a card. And then there's the final card section. And I have two different parts. There's the projected total expenses, which originally I tried to keep under $400. I was assuming that I would only do 2 months or something like that. And then the final expenses, which I'm trying to reconfigure. I think I have a bit more. But so far what I've been kind of refactoring the budget for is first just getting all of the odors available at the Stink Factory, which increases it from $40 to $131, and then refactoring different parts to be able to cover that. So I do have some stock paper left over, been taking those things off and bumping it off. For the final cards, I increased the size to 6x9 envelope, so that's increased that cost, and then had to add 3 different new items. So transfer tape is to help me transfer a full sheet of a sticker sheet to the cardstock paper that would then be cut. And then brass paper fasteners would be to help with that rotary structure so it actually holds on. Velcro is the scratching mechanism, which I already had a bunch of for a different reason. And then 2 things that I added on more recently was this hardware/software section. So for hardware, I ended up getting that MIDI pad / MIDI controller, which is a Korg NanoPad 2 off of eBay for $47. And then I got an interesting application, which is the IP4K. This is an application so that you can use your camera or your iPhone or what have you as an IP camera, and that's what I use to walk around. For Android, you can actually get that stuff for free. There's some free applications for that. But for iOS, you seem to have to shovel out a little bit of money to make that happen, and I'd recommend that if anyone's streaming their studio. That made it really easy. And then the only thing at the bottom is just estimated amounts that I'm receiving and thinking about, and then at the top, the total expenses as things go. Usually you won't have a projected and then an actual expenses section, so you can kind of compare where you need to put more money in if you do future projects like this. That's been super helpful in my kind of work. And then up here, there's just kind of variables you can change that'll change the estimates. So if I change this to number of sets of 1, it reduces the cost automatically. Bring it back to 2. Let's say I want 150 people, increases the cost to 647. And that's just helpful for me to get, when I was proposing this project, I was kind of playing around with the numbers to try and find something that seemed like a good number of sets and a good number of maximum people that I can actually accommodate for each set. Because the issue when doing this kind of stuff is that you're mailing a physical thing, so it's not free to just do a set. And I want to make it free for people to actually receive these cards and use them. So it's not just a limited attendance of 3 people. Not that I would complain. I'm just trying to think of how many people can I accommodate, hopefully, with the budget given. So yeah, that's mostly it. I'm probably going to hang around on the stream until my previous answers are done and basically call it the end for today. Yeah. Feel free to also reach out to me on Instagram at JazXFlowers. I'm down here. And then if you're interested in the laboratory, you can actually go to the other one over here, Laboratory Residency on Instagram. And feel free to message me or email me questions or thoughts. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on things. Things I didn't show is that I had also a collection of 100 scratch and sniff children's books for a project that I was doing / am doing slowly with what's it called? The Institute for Art and Olfaction, and I can actually show that data set because it's pretty cool. As a quick thing, let's see. Scratch and sniff books, open database. Here we go. Yeah, so it's a data set of 100 children's books that I have acquired and basically tried to like squeeze out a bunch of information out of to help either researchers interested in this topic on like what were the production methodologies, what were the odors, how is it spaced out in a book, so on, or parents actually. This is like one that I'm super excited about. Like parents that want to talk, just smell things with their children, or blind or visually impaired children and their parents, or their parents that are blind or visually impaired. Because it's a really engaging activity to kind of share those odors and talk about them. And so, yeah, there's like 100 of these. Try to put out all the information that I can. And then if it loads, you can kind of actually see that for the sample set that I have of books, using stickers is actually really common. And then screen printing becomes more and more common, like I would say starting in the 90s or something, but I do have a gap in my data. And then comparing the number of odors to the number of pages has been pretty interesting because it seems like it's kind of near, the gap is narrowing a bit. It used to be that there was a lot of pages with only like a third of them, of the pages having odors, but that's changing. So yeah. Oh, I forgot that I can drink something.